My name is Helen Collins. I'm 29 years old and I work at the local library in a small town that most people have probably never heard of. My life is simple, maybe too simple for some, but it's mine. I've always been the quiet type, preferring the company of books to the loud outside world. The library is my sanctuary. It's a small, old building with creaky floors and shelves that have seen better days. But to me, it's perfect. Every day, I open the library doors at 8 a.m., turn on the lights, and breathe in the familiar scent of books. It's a routine that never gets old. My parents passed away when I was young, so I was raised by my grandmother. She was a kind woman, always encouraging me to read and learn. But she's gone now too, and I'm all alone. No siblings, no close relatives, just me and my small world. Good morning, Helen. Mr. Jenkins, a regular visitor, greets me as he walks in. He's an elderly man who spends his days reading history books. Good morning, Mr. Jenkins. The new shipment of history books arrived yesterday. I've set them aside for you, I reply with a smile. Ah, you know me too well, dear. He chuckles, shuffling towards the designated shelf. The day goes on like this, with familiar faces coming and going. I help a group of kids find books for their school project, recommend a romance novel to Mrs. Harrison, and guide Mr. Thompson to the science fiction section. It's a quiet life, but I like it. I find comfort in the predictability, the routine. And then one day, everything changed. The day Jack walked into my life. He came in looking for a book, but I could tell he wasn't the regular library type. He seemed out of place with his crisp suit and confident stride. Can you help me find a book? He asked, his voice smooth and inviting. Of course. What are you looking for? I replied, trying to keep my composure. It's a novel, The Great Gatsby, I believe. Right this way, I said, leading him to the classic section. As I handed him the book, our hands brushed briefly, sending a jolt through me. It was a simple touch, but it lingered in my mind. Thank you, Helen, he said, reading my name tag. I'm Jack. It's nice to meet you, Jack. That brief encounter marked the beginning of everything. The beginning of a love that I thought would last a lifetime. The beginning of a journey that would take me from the quiet life I knew into a world of chaos and betrayal. If only I had known then what I know now, maybe things would have been different. But life doesn't come with a warning label, and sometimes we just have to learn the hard way. After that first meeting, Jack began to visit the library more frequently. It was odd, considering he didn't strike me as the reading type. But every time he came in, he'd ask for a book recommendation and then spend a few minutes chatting with me. One day, he walked in just as I was struggling with a box of newly arrived books. Need a hand with that? He offered, walking over. That would be great, thanks, I said, relieved. As we placed the books on the shelves, he asked, So, Helen, what got you into working at a library? I shrugged. I've always loved books. They're like friends, you know. Plus, it's nice and quiet here. He laughed. I can see that. It's like a whole different world. Our conversations grew longer with each visit. I found out that Jack worked in his family's business, something to do with real estate. He was easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was genuinely interested in me. Then one day, he surprised me. Helen, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? He asked, a hopeful look in his eyes. I was taken aback. Like a date? Yes, like a date, he smiled. I hesitated. This was new territory for me, but there was something about him that made me want to say yes. Okay, sure, I'd like that, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We went to a small restaurant in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. We talked about everything and nothing, and for a few hours, I forgot about my usually solitary life. Walking home, Jack said, I had a really great time tonight, Helen. You're very different from the people I usually meet. I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled. He continued. I'd like to see you again. Would that be okay? I nodded. Yes, I'd like that. From then on, we started seeing each other more regularly. He'd take me out to dinner, or we'd go for walks. It was nice. For once, I felt like I was part of something more, part of a world that wasn't just about books and quietness. It wasn't long before I fell for him. Hard. He was charming and attentive, and he made me feel special. And when he proposed, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. Looking back, I wish I had seen the signs. I wish I had known that the charm was just a mask, a cover for something much less pleasant. But love has a way of blinding you, of making you ignore the warning signs. And I was very much in love, or at least I thought I was. After Jack and I got engaged, things started to change. It began with his parents. They didn't approve of me from the start. They thought I was below their son because I didn't come from money. The first time I met them, it was clear they didn't like me. We were at their house for dinner, and I was nervous. It was a big, fancy house, nothing like what I was used to. Helen, this is my mother, Margaret, and my father, Richard, Jack introduced. Nice to meet you, I said, trying to smile. Margaret looked me up and down. So you're the girl who works at the library. Yes, I am, I replied, feeling smaller by the second. Richard chimed in. Jack, couldn't you find someone more suitable? I felt like crawling into a hole. The dinner was long and uncomfortable. They made it clear they thought I wasn't good enough for their son. But Jack stood up for me, which made me love him even more. Before our wedding, they insisted on a prenuptial agreement. They said it was just a formality. I didn't have much to lose, so I agreed without making a fuss. Once we got married, I moved into Jack's house, which was actually his parents' house. They had given it to him as a wedding gift, but they acted like it was still theirs. His parents came over all the time, unannounced. They'd walk in and start ordering me around. Helen, make us some coffee, Margaret would demand as soon as she walked in. And I would, without saying anything. I didn't want to cause trouble. One day, Margaret pointed at the TV and said, Remember, Helen, in case of divorce, you can't claim this. It was like that with everything. They reminded me constantly that everything in the house wasn't mine. Jack started changing too. He wasn't the man I fell in love with. He started joining in on the jokes his parents made about me. One evening, I was trying to decide what to wear for a family event. I asked Jack for his opinion. This one makes you look less drab, he said, laughing. I was hurt. It was like he was a different person around his parents. He didn't stand up for me anymore. Instead, he laughed along with them. It was exhausting, living in that house. I felt like an outsider, an unwanted guest. I kept hoping things would get better, but they only got worse. The stress got to me. I started having stomach pains, bad ones. I tried to ignore them, but one day I collapsed at the library. I woke up in the hospital. The doctor said it was stress-related. I was in the hospital for a few days. Jack didn't visit. He didn't even call. I felt so alone. Then, one day, a notary came to my room. He had news. My great-aunt, someone I barely remembered, had passed away, and she had left me her fortune, $30 million. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know what to do with that kind of money, but suddenly, I wasn't just the poor girl from the library anymore. When Jack and his parents found out, they came to visit. Suddenly, they were all smiles and sweetness. Darling, we're so happy for you, Margaret said, her voice dripping with fake concern. Yes, we're a family. We should support each other, Richard added. I didn't buy it. It was too much of a change. After they left, I overheard them talking outside my room. They didn't know I was listening. She's such a fool. Can you believe our luck? Jack laughed. We need to make sure she doesn't leave you, Jack. Maybe you should have a child with her. That will tie her down, Margaret suggested. I felt sick to my stomach. These people didn't care about me. They just wanted my money. I knew then what I